Have you ever gone back to a place where you once lived and felt that strange mix of nostalgia and dissonance? The streets are the same, the cafes are the same, maybe even the people are the same, but something still feels different. That is because you aren't the same. This is what we're going to be talking about in this episode of This Expat Life. Hi, welcome to This Expat Life. My name is Amanda Maxime, and as a certified coach, I help high-achieving expats find more fulfillment and happiness in their global lives. Because while life abroad is often amazing, it is not only rainbows and butterflies, as all experienced expats know. In This Expat Life, I open up space for all facets of life abroad and what you can do to thrive in it. And to support you in your personal, professional, and geographic life transitions, I share tips, tell relatable stories, and connect with fellow expats. Whether you've just moved abroad or you are a seasoned expat, This Expat Life is your place to find real understanding and to grow from the inside out. Enjoy the show. In this podcast and in my work, I often speak about your next chapter. But what if you go back to a previous chapter of your global life? I recently had that experience not once, but actually twice in just literally 2 weeks, I think. And I want to speak about that experience of going back to the place where you once lived, because I'm sure I'm not the only one. But first, let me take you back to, 2 weeks ago now? I was in Rio de Janeiro and I had just gotten off an Uber where I was cracking jokes with the Uber driver, and we were talking about Madonna, who came to a show a year ago, and now probably Lady Gaga. I got off the Uber, I walked the streets of Ipanema and I saw the beautiful trees. I heard all the noise in that neighborhood, which was the one thing that really drove me insane when I lived there. And I entered the nail salon where I used to do my nails. And as I entered, I right away saw the guy that always did my nails, and we right away said okay, he's going to be in charge of my nails. I was with my two sisters, so they had other people taking care of them. And as I was sitting in the nail salon and just waiting for my nail polish to dry, I just had the weirdest sensation. It kind of felt schizophrenic, like I know this life, I know all the details, and I'm in it at the moment, I'm living it. But it still feels like I'm looking at it as if it were a picture, a painting. It didn't feel like I was actually in it. It felt I was looking at it from a distance. And I really had this experience where I recognized everything, but I couldn't really let it in. It was the weirdest sensation. And I would like to know if you ever had this before. And I think that is because a year ago, I lived in Rio for 6 months. I came back, a little over a year ago now. And I lived in Ipanema, the neighborhood where I was hanging out, going to this nail salon now. And I knew everything there. Everything was so familiar. We went to my favorite store, the farm store, Farmy, as you pronounce it in Portuguese. I bought some clothes there. I had pão de queijo. I had all the things that I had when I was living there. I did all the things I did when I was living there. And I spoke that language again that was still somewhere in my brain, thank God. Yet I was like, it's weird. I'm not fully present. And I really think it's because when you go back to a place where you once lived, it feels so familiar, like it brings up this muscle memory, basically. But at the same time, you're realizing it is not my life anymore. It is not who I am today. And this can give you that dissonance, right? There's perhaps some nostalgia for the things that you're seeing, the things that you're experiencing, the people that you're hanging out with. But there's also this gap or this, like a glass wall in between you and what you're going back to. And that's not because those things have changed. That place has probably stayed the same. But you have changed because you have grown beyond who you were at that time in that chapter of your global life. And you have grown into something else, something more, something different. Maybe it's just a nuance. But when you go back to that place, that is when it becomes so apparent. As for me, I left Rio in a state where I was like, I'm ready to leave. I really enjoyed my first 3 months in the city. I had a lot of fun. I was really happy to be there. But by month 5 especially, I had grown literally so tired of all that noise in the city that my body almost couldn't take it anymore. And I was really ready to leave. It was kind of like a love-hate relationship. I loved a lot of things about Rio. It's such a beautiful city. The people are amazing and so kind, and it has a really special atmosphere. But I just couldn't deal with the fact that I wasn't sleeping at night properly, right? That really impacted me. So when I left Rio, I was kind of happy to leave. Also sad that it didn't fully work out for me, but I was kind of accepting it all. And now when I came back, I really felt, yeah, I've outgrown this chapter because one, the noise right away annoyed me. But two, what I was also really missing in Rio at the time was a bit of ambition around me. I'm in my work mode, my work era, I'm in my ambition era. And I realized when I was living there, and it was something I was already afraid of or anticipating, that Rio wasn't the right environment for my ambition era. And now as I revisited the place, it got confirmed to me again. And it was a really nice way to, it was really nice to be back and to just soak into all the good stuff from Rio. But at the same time, I was like, yeah, we are done here. Our relationship for now has paused. It's not ended. I'll for sure go back because I still love the city. But this is not the place for me where I can really live into my next era, my current era, the identity I have at the moment. What also contributed to the fact that I was experiencing Rio through like this glass wall was also because I was traveling with my 2 sisters, and we were staying in a hotel just a little bit outside of like the Ipanema Leblon area. It's a short cab ride away. And it's a beautiful hotel. If you've ever been to Rio, you might know this. I always forget the name of it, but it's such a beautiful hotel. It has a tiny private beach. It has a really beautiful view. But it was a bit further away, so you are not in the neighborhoods that I particularly love. And that added to the fact that I wasn't fully in it, right? Because literally I had to take an Uber or a 40-minute walk or something to get to the place where I was living before. So literally I wasn't fully in it. And what also made it different was that I was also with my 2 sisters and the crew of the plane that we flew with, because my sister is a flight attendant and we flew with her. And not like that we were with them 24/7, but we did spend dinners with them, etc. And while I was also meeting my friends for dinner, my sisters and the crew were also there. And I really loved sharing my Rio experience with my sisters because I was finally so happy to show what my life in Rio was like. If you live abroad and not everyone has visited you, you know what I'm talking about, right? You want your people to see what life is like there so they can understand it better. And so I was really happy to show them around. And I think I said on average 6 times a day, this is the noise that I had to deal with. But because I was with them, I was also experiencing it differently. I wasn't fully in it again because they were more Brazil newbies and they were more worried about safety, for example. I'm always careful, but with them, because they were so fixated, the crew as well, on security and safety, which makes sense because they're traveling for work, I also was more fixated on that. And that wasn't really the experience that I was living when I was in Rio. So that also contributed to the glass wall that I had. So yeah, that is kind of a dissonance there. And I mentioned at the start of this episode that I didn't experience it once, I experienced it twice. Because everyone asked me, what was it like being back in Rio? But no one asked me, what was it like being back in London? Because straight after Rio, I went to London to host a super fun coaching network dinner with Candice, who I had on the show before. And I spent a couple of days in London. And I lived in London for 2.5 years. And I left London 10 years ago. Same thing, actually. I was really ready to leave London at the time because I think I was already in a burnout. And if I wasn't in it, I was very near to it. This is a story I'll share another time, I think, on the episode. But I was working for a company with a really toxic culture that brought up a lot of insecurities that I had about myself. And it was just getting worse and worse and stress, and I couldn't deal with it anymore. And at the time, my only way out was to quit the job and leave London altogether and move back to the Netherlands without another job lined up. And in hindsight, if I, had known what I know now, I would have seen that the fix, quote unquote, has always been on the inside and not on the outside that I was trying to change. Anyway, I'm drifting off. I left London also on that note of like, it's bittersweet, which was way more present and way bigger than in Rio. In Rio, I was just done with it. And in London, I was really like, I need to get myself out of here. And so for a long time, my relationship with London felt a bit tense because I was proud of having lived in London for 2.5 years. But the way that I left, it really felt like a defeat, if I'm honest. And a year later or so, I visited London again, and I was hanging out mostly in East London. And I was just like, I just don't like this city that much anymore. And then it took me, 6-7 years before I returned again. So in 2022, I returned, and in 2023 as well. And this is when I've all of a sudden started loving London again. I was staying in West London, which may have made a difference, I'm not sure. But all of a sudden I could see London again for what it was, without the connotation that I had to it as well. I had my own filter of how I experienced London that I added to that experience again when I was visiting it. And I'm really happy that since 2022, that filter has become neutral again and just really positive about London. So now I went back to London again, and it was also a really weird experience, and not in a way that I had with Rio, where I felt like, okay, everything is so familiar, but I'm still experiencing it from a distance. This time in London, it was more like, oh, did I once live here? I almost can't remember it. Now, I've shared before that I'm incredibly future-oriented, so my view is naturally always going to the future. I don't look back that much. And my memory is also really bad. So whenever I think of who I used to be and where I used to be, it's almost like another dissonance there. Like I almost can't connect with the Amanda that lived in London. And as I was walking around the city and taking the tube, I was like, I've walked here before. I've taken the tube before. I've done these things before. And I've met these people before. I was hanging out with some old friends. But I really felt like it almost doesn't feel like me anymore. It was really weird. But what was nice about this experience was that I got to experience London from this neutral point of view, like where maybe I could add a new chapter of London to my life again. Because I was walking around there and I was really like, okay, this city would match my ambition era and the things that I crave this moment. So I could see myself living there again. And that was not because I wanted to go back to an old chapter, which I will touch upon in a moment, but because I thought, this city, the way that I'm experiencing it now from a neutral point of view without the old baggage, is really matching with what I want to experience and is really the environment that allows the current me to thrive in. So, yeah, I'm not saying that is going to happen, but I'm like open to this possibility of if it ever lands in my lap. So what I just said as well about going back to a previous chapter, I know a few people, some of my clients, some of my friends, that are living lives in a place where they are not 100% happy. They are not thriving. They just keep thinking like, I'm not happy here, I should change something, but they don't really know what the next step is, or they just feel stuck in taking action. And one of the thoughts that keeps coming up for them is like, what if I go back to the place where I lived before? Because in that place, there were maybe some downsides, but at least overall I felt good. Or a particular, area of their life was really going well there. And maybe they want to invest more in that area of their life. So I know a few people who keep wondering about that previous chapter or that previous location. What if I go back to it and relive it again? Then will I go back to being happy? And the answer is something that, if this resonates with you, that you need to decide on your own, because there's no right or wrong answer here, obviously. It's all so individual. But I think what is really important as a takeaway, and obviously you already know this, is that you have grown into something else as well. You are not the same person that you were when you were living there. And it can very well be that going back to that previous place is matching with who you are right now and is really what you need, like I am experiencing with London. But it could also be that there is this nostalgia or this desire for comfort that is really driving that thought. And to go back to a place because of like, well, at least I was happy there, or maybe, that's just what is possible for me, is not always the best foundation for a decision that big. Now, you may very well come to the conclusion that yes, you will be happier there because you were very happy in the previous location and it turned out worse in the new location. And you are really realizing the previous environment was one that was much better matching with me. But you also have to realize that you have grown as a person. So how you felt before may not be how you're going to feel again, because who you were before was really matching with that location. But as you have changed now, how subtle the change has been or your progress, the match may not be 100% okay again. So I just want you to be mindful of that as you are thinking about that place of where you felt so good. And also I personally, but this is for everyone on its own to decide, don't think that this nostalgia should be a reason to go back somewhere, because I can think it can different perception of it. Where you are not fully seeing everything again. When I moved to Rio last year, it was driven a little bit by nostalgia, not so much nostalgia, but I really, after so much that happened in my personal life here in The Hague with my parents dying and heartbreak and more stuff, I really felt a longing to go back to the country that once made me so happy. However, that wasn't the real driver. The driver was that I had always wanted to live in Rio for a short while. So I was just matching the two. And really, my experience in Rio was very, very different from my experience in Brasilia. So nostalgia wasn't the driver here. Now, if you decide that nostalgia is a driver for you, good for you. But for myself, I know this is not the best driver. And I just want you to be mindful of that as you are thinking about that previous location where you get that nostalgic feeling, oh, everything was so much better there. Just remember that you've also grown as a person and it might not be the same. And then finally, something else that I noticed as I was going to these places was that I realized I lived in different places, right? I lived in Brasilia, Rio, London, The Hague several times. I lived in Buenos Aires. I spent quite some time in Ecuador and Latin America traveling as well. And all these places are my home. And obviously, the Netherlands is my rooted home, I guess, or like my original home, maybe to say it like that, where I have most of my I have all my family and most of my friends. But I very much feel at home in these other places too. And these places have been my home. And I had very important and formative chapters of my life taking place in these locations. Places where I first started working. I never had like a job in the Netherlands until I became a diplomat. I had only jobs in London at that time. It was the place where, I became a bit more mature in Brasilia, for example, in my early 30s. It was also the place where I lost a friend who passed away in Brasilia. And so a lot of important things happened while I was living abroad, and that really created a sense of home for these places within me. And I always felt at home in these places for most of it. And now as I was going through these cities, I recognized, oh yeah, these were homes at some point in my life, and I could connect with it to a certain extent, to Rio more than London, but still looking at it from this glass wall. But I also realized if all these places were home to me, then where do I really belong? Now, that is a question that not very often pops up in my head. I know it does for many of my clients and maybe for you as well as you're listening to it. Where do I belong? If you have such a global life that is like scattered across the globe, all your friends are in different places, important experiences happened in different places, you feel at home in different places. So where do you truly belong? And I myself am more and more seeing that I don't fully belong in the Netherlands anymore. It's been hard for me adjusting here and being back after having lived such an international life. I might host a podcast about this someday soon. I now identify more as like a global citizen, but I still feel like I'm floating sometimes. Like, it is good to have local roots. It is good to belong somewhere in a more geographical location rather than this like group of global citizens. And it made me wonder a little bit, where do I really belong? And I still feel the strongest ties are with the Netherlands, but all these other homes are part of the equation too. And it just made me realize again, as I was saying in the previous episode too, I believe, that it is so important to create that inner home, to have that super strong foundation within yourself that you know, okay, this is who I am, this is what I need, this is what I bring to the table, this is how I thrive, this is how I tick, this is what triggers me. I know all these things about myself, and I accept myself fully so that at least I can come home within myself. I create that belonging within myself, and I create that belonging in my relationships with other people. So not so much geographically, but more in an energetic kind of way. You create that belonging with yourself and with your tribe, wherever they may be. But to create that kind of belonging, I think it's really important that you have to know yourself on this really profound level so that you can really get that inner homecoming that I'm talking about. And that inner homecoming is really about accepting yourself fully, including your shadow sides, the parts that you prefer to avoid, the parts that you're ashamed about, the parts that you don't even know exist. That is when you do the inner homecoming. And I very often see with people who book match calls with me for my one-on-one coaching that they are still fighting against certain parts of themselves. They feel they are a failure sometimes. They are ashamed. They are afraid of things. And it is because a lot of times they're not fully accepting all those quote-unquote negative parts of themselves as well, the less desirable parts, let's say. And in my coaching, we then really take a look at, okay, what is really going on for you below the surface that you prefer to push away, but regardless of whether you push it away or not, it's still going to be there. And can you acknowledge that and truly accept yourself with all those things, the shadow sides, the flaws, whatsoever, so that the moment that you can really, really accept yourself, you're not so afraid anymore. You're definitely not ashamed anymore. You don't really care that much about what other people think of you because you are accepting yourself. So I'm drifting off again, but this is such an important topic for many expats because they live this global life. They do not always belong to one tribe or one place. All these places, physical places, have their own norms and rules and habits and rituals and whatsoever. And if you lived in several places, you don't necessarily fit into one group anymore because you've seen what else is possible for you. You know, after I lived in Rio or Brazil or Latin America as a younger woman, I see spontaneous visits and family visits and doing things for other people in a way different light. Because in the Netherlands, everything is very individualistic and planned. And in Latin America, it's much more, come on over, we have space for you, you are so welcome, how can I help you? Let's see this as a community. And that really shaped me. And that's also why I sometimes don't truly feel like I still belong in the Netherlands. So my point is that if you have that global life and you are a bit of here, a bit of that, even though your core might still be with your home country, it is more important to create that inner homecoming and to truly accept yourself and understand yourself so that you don't constantly have to adjust yourself to fit in with these other groups. Okay, that was my TED Talk for today. I hope you enjoyed this episode, but actually I would really love to hear from you because before creating this episode, I was thinking, how often do I speak with people about returning to the places where they once lived? And it's almost never. So I have a lot of expats, global citizens in my friend groups. But if I take a look at my friends from Brasilia, I'm the only one who has returned to Brasilia to visit there, and none of them have. And I know for many people, they often don't like to go back to the city because they feel like, what if it's changed and it will make me change how I view the place or how my memory is of my time there. So they prefer, like, it's better to not visit again because all my friends have gone. So, I'm going to experience it less positively. And so with my friends who are not expats, I don't have this conversation at all. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from you Have you ever gone back to the places where you lived for a short visit or to start a new chapter again? And if so, how was it for you? I would really love to know. Please feel very welcome to send me a message. Send me an email, info@amandamaximecoaching.com, or send me an Instagram or LinkedIn message. You can find me on Instagram @AmandaMaxime. I'll put it in the show notes. And just share what came up for you and how it was for you. I would really love to hear that. And who knows, I might do a sequence to this episode. Okay, that was it for now. I hope you have a wonderful day wherever you are, and talk to you next time.